Amid a storm of bullets, I slammed Harper against an indestructible obsidian wall, shielding her from the deadly stray rounds, then lowered my head and fiercely kissed her trembling red lips. Afterward, I spun around, pulled out that battered wooden pickaxe, and brought it crashing down through the air at the multi-million-dollar heavy helicopter outside the window. Welcome to Apex System, an exciting story is about to begin. The icy rain struck my face like a barrage of needle tips. Mingling with the stench of mud and the nauseating reek of blood, I suddenly opened my eyes and gasped for breath like a drowning person pulled to safety. As my vision gradually focused in the darkness, my heart pounded like a war drum. Just a second ago, my memories had still been trapped in that suffocating, desperate rainy night. The Silicon Valley oligarch Julian Thorne, who fancied himself a god of technology, smiling as he pulled the trigger on me, and the love of my life, Harper Quinn, had collapsed in a pool of blood like a broken doll, utterly lifeless. I swear I'll crush every single bone in that bastard Julian's body. But now, I touched my brow. There was no bullet hole, no fatal injury. I propped myself up on the slick mud and sat up, realizing that I was lying in a 6-foot-deep mud pit. Surrounding me were the desolate pine forests of New Jersey. I knew this place all too well. It was the favorite dumping ground of the cleaners under Julian. Good God, Declan Hayes, hadn't died? No, more precisely, I had actually returned to the moment when those bastards executed me. Just then, a mechanical voice suddenly rang out deep within my mind, utterly devoid of emotion, yet crystal clear. Host vital signs detected. The real-world sandbox creation system has been activated. Current status: health full, 10 hearts. Novice protection mechanism initiated. Basic passive skill unlocked. Bare-handed mining. System? Sandbox creation? Isn't this the pixel game called Minecraft that I used to play with Harper? Before I could make sense of it all, gruff voices drifted down from above the mud pit. That kid's damn heavy. Why does Julian insist we bury him in this awful weather? Wouldn't it be easier to stuff him in a gas can and sink him in the Hudson? A hoarse voice complained. Shut up. You take someone's money. You deal with their problems. Hurry up and bury him with the shovel. I've got a stripper waiting for me tonight. Another voice replied impatiently. I raised my head and, through the curtain of rain, vaguely saw 2 burly men wearing black tactical vests leaning against a heavy-duty customized Hummer off-road vehicle worth more than $1,000,000. Smoking. I had no time to think too deeply about what this system was. My top priority now was to survive, and then save Harper. On this very day in my previous life, Harper had been framed by Julian and met her death. I looked at my hands, caked with mud. Had the system just said mine barehanded? Following the wall of the pit, I felt the trunk of a sturdy old oak. Gritting my teeth, I decided to give it a try. Swung my fist back, and slammed it hard into the trunk. Bang! 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 There was no expected tearing of flesh. Not even the slightest pain. Instead, after 3 extremely muffled impacts, a crisp pop rang out, and a huge section of that old oak tree, one that would have taken 2 people to encircle, simply vanished into thin air. Immediately afterward, a perfect cube of wood began to shrink eerily in midair before diving straight into the virtual inventory that had appeared out of nowhere at the edge of my retina. Inventory display. Oak log. Quantity: 1. This was fucking insane. If Newton had witnessed the scene, he probably would have burst right through the lid of his coffin. Hey, there's movement in the pit. The kid's not dead. The killer above finally noticed something was wrong. He immediately tossed aside his cigarette butt and drew a Glock pistol from his waistband. Bang! Bang! 2 bullets whistled toward me. One of them grazed my shoulder, but instead of bleeding, I saw a row of red heart icons flicker in the upper left corner of my vision, with half a heart turning gray. There was no pain, only a dull impact, as if I had been shoved by something heavy. I've really been digitized. Damn it! You're still not dead? The killer cursed, preparing to empty the magazine. I was like an enraged cheetah, suddenly flipping up and leaping from the edge of the mud pit. I had no weapons and no armor, but I possessed the most absurd, and most lethal, system in the world. To dodge the dense hail of bullets, I charged straight toward the heavy bulletproof Hummer SUV they were so proud of. Go to hell, you monster! The killer shouted as he opened fire wildly. I took a deep breath. My fists, like pile drivers fueled by the fury of revenge, hammered relentlessly into the Hummer's hood. Bang! 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 Crunch! Only 3 seconds had passed. Under the horrified, ghost-struck gazes of the 2 assassins, the 3-ton custom Hummer off-road vehicle, boasting mine-resistant capabilities, let out a crisp sound like shattering glass. Then, an utterly astonishing scene unfolded. The vehicle's supposedly indestructible bulletproof armor and complex V8 engine all disintegrated beneath my fist in an instant, transforming into square iron ingots suspended in midair, and several clumps of glowing red redstone dust. My God, what kind of sorcery is this? The assassin who had been complaining about the weather only moments ago now collapsed at the knees, his pistol dropping straight into the muddy water as his eyes filled with utter despair and terror. I grabbed one of the heavy iron ingots hovering in midair, the corners of my mouth curling into an icy, bone-chilling smile. This isn't witchcraft, pal. I stepped over the pixelated blocks strewn across the ground and looked at them coldly. It's called physical exorcism. Bang! I swung the iron ingot and brought it down mercilessly. After dealing with these two scumbags, I stood in the pouring rain and glanced at the oak logs in my inventory. Time was running out. Julian's dark hand was already reaching for Harper. The game of revenge was only just beginning. Cold rainwater dripped from my chin. I wiped the muddy water from my face and glanced at the blood-stained tactical watch on my wrist. 9:15 p.m. My heart suddenly clenched, and a chill shot up my spine to the back of my head. According to my memories from my previous life, at exactly 10 o'clock tonight, Harper would be lured by that hypocrite Julian to an abandoned shipyard in Brooklyn under the pretext of discussing an investment in new energy. There would be no investors there, only an inescapable trap and a group of heavily armed psychopaths. In my previous life, when I arrived there at 10:30, all I saw was her cold body lying in a pool of blood. I have 45 minutes left. Damn it! I have to hurry. I clenched my teeth, my gaze quickly focusing on the wondrous virtual interface in my mind. The oak log I had just obtained by smashing that old tree with my bare hands was quietly floating in my inventory. Under my mental control, a simple 2x2 crafting grid appeared on the right side of the interface. I knew this thing well, far too well. I rapidly issued a command in my mind. System: break down the oak log into oak planks. With an extremely faint yet crisp crack of wood, the log in the inventory instantly vanished, replaced by 4 planks with smooth surfaces and a faint pine scent. Continue. Fill the crafting grid with 4 oak planks and craft me a crafting table. The moment the command was issued, a faint glow erupted in the void. Immediately afterward, with a muffled thud, a solid, heavy wooden workbench measuring 1 meter in length and 1 meter in width fell out of midair without warning, landing squarely in the muddy pine forest of New Jersey and splashing mud everywhere. Its surface was covered in grid lines, while pixelated reliefs of saws and hammers hung on its sides, making it look both absurd and incredibly real. If a state trooper happened to witness this scene, they would undoubtedly think I was putting on some avant-garde rural woodworking performance art in the middle of the wilderness. But I had no interest in admiring this miracle that defied the laws of physics. I strode forward and slammed my right hand onto the workbench's wet surface. Ding! A larger 3x3 crafting grid unfolded across my retinas. Without hesitation, I arranged 2 wooden planks one above the other and willed. Craft wooden sticks. 4 slender wooden sticks instantly took shape. Next came the moment to witness a miracle. I took a deep breath, placed 3 oak planks horizontally across the top row of the crafting grid, and then positioned 2 sticks vertically in the middle column. This recipe was as familiar as if it had been etched into my DNA. System: craft a wooden pickaxe. A golden glimmer flashed through the rainy night, and a weapon suddenly materialized, floating above the crafting table. I grabbed it in one hand. It was an extremely crude, cheap-looking pickaxe. Both its head and handle were made entirely of ordinary oak, with unfinished splinters still visible on its surface. It was so light that it felt like a child's toy. If you tossed it onto the floor of a hardware store, it probably wouldn't fetch even 10 cents. But the moment I gripped it, that emotionless mechanical voice in my mind rang out once again. Yet this time it sounded as beautiful as heavenly music. Ding! Congratulations, host, on synthesizing a basic tool. Wooden pickaxe. Item attributes: durability, 60, base physical attack, extremely low. Hidden passive attributes unlocked: true damage and absolute destruction against any non-block type entity armor, bulletproof vest, or metal shield in the real world. The defense value is considered 0 when determining this weapon's attack. I froze for a second, then couldn't help throwing my head back and laughing wildly in the pouring rain. True damage? Ignores defense? What did this mean? It meant that even if Julian spent tens of millions of dollars equipping his mercenaries with the U.S. military's highest-grade ballistic plates, or arrived in an armored vehicle to block me, there would still be nothing more than a bunch of raw eggs with their shells peeled off in the face of this wooden pickaxe. I smacked the workbench into a block and tucked it back into my inventory, hooked the wooden pickaxe at my waist, and charged out of the pine forest. The 2 schmucks I just sent to the afterlife with pixelated iron ingots had wrecked the main vehicle, but a black Chevrolet Suburban they'd used as a disguise was still parked on the dirt road at the edge of the woods. I kicked the car window to pieces, reached inside to pop the lock, and expertly yanked out the 2 ignition wires beneath the steering wheel. Bzzzt, vroom. The V8 engine let out a beastly roar, and the blinding headlights instantly tore through the darkness of the rainy night. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it. The heavy off-road vehicle skidded wildly through the mud before charging onto Interstate 95 toward Brooklyn like a black Tyrannosaurus. Roaring all the way, the windshield wipers swung frantically across the glass, while the streetlights on either side of the road became a series of blurred afterimages. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my gaze as cold as Siberian ice. On the passenger seat, the pickaxe lay there in silence, exuding a deadly menace. Harper, wait for me. In this life, Even if God himself descended to Earth, he would not lay a finger on you. Julian, prepare to face your doom. The black Chevrolet Suburban rampaged across Brooklyn's slick streets like a rhinoceros gone mad. At 9:50 p.m., I slammed on the brakes. The tires let out a piercing screech against the rain-soaked asphalt, and the vehicle came to a steady stop in front of the abandoned shipyard's massive, rusted iron gate. The torrential rain showed no sign of letting up. Under the flashes of lightning, the towering gantry cranes looked like gigantic steel monsters, looming over these ruins steeped in the stench of death. I didn't draw my gun. The habits I'd developed as a top mercenary in my previous life had been completely cast aside. Instead, I simply grabbed the crude wooden-handled pickaxe from the passenger seat, pushed open the door, and stepped into the rain. Stop! Who are you? This is private property. Get out! As soon as I approached the side door of the factory building, 2 blinding tactical flashlights lit up the darkness. 2 guards wearing heavy ballistic tactical vests and carrying AR-15 assault rifles emerged from behind a shipping container. The infrared laser sights, like the eyes of venomous snakes, remained fixed on my chest. In the past, I would have looked for cover or used a tactical roll to evade their fire, then found an opportunity to shoot them in the head. But now, I was a player with cheats enabled. I didn't even stop walking. I merely stared coldly at them as my pace grew faster and faster, until I broke into a full sprint. Damn it! This lunatic is asking for death. Open fire! Rat-tat-tat-tat! The muzzle spewed dazzling tongues of flame, and a dense hail of bullets poured over me like a torrential downpour. The hearts in the upper left corner of the system began flashing wildly, dropping instantly from a full 10 hearts to 4.5. Although I couldn't feel pain, the oppressive sensation of being repeatedly struck by blunt objects still made my breath catch. But that was enough. As long as my health bar didn't hit 0, I wouldn't die. I charged through a hail of bullets and forced my way right up to the guard on the left. He watched me take dozens of rounds and still remain full of vitality. The eyes beneath his helmet were filled with the terror of seeing a ghost, and he instinctively tried to retreat. Too late. True damage. Activate. I let out a low growl, gripped the crude wooden pickaxe tightly with both hands, aimed at his chest, covered by a heavy ceramic ballistic plate, and swung down with all my strength. Bang! An extremely dull sound, like striking a broken drum, erupted. There were no sparks flying, nor any fragments from the bulletproof vest. The instant the wooden pickaxe touched his chest, the high-tech protective suit, capable of stopping even armor-piercing rounds, was pierced straight through by an invisible force of rules, as if it were made of paper. Crack! The guard let out a shriek so horrific it barely sounded human. Under the heavy blow of the wooden pickaxe, his entire chest instantly caved in, and his body was sent flying backward 5 or 6 meters like a torn rag doll before crashing heavily into a shipping container. He died on the spot. Until his dying moment, he couldn't understand why a lousy wooden pickaxe could ignore his armor, which was worth tens of thousands of dollars. Jesus! The guard on the right was so terrified by this scene that he could barely keep hold of his gun. I turned and hurled the wooden pickaxe in my hand. Whoosh, smack! The wooden pickaxe carved a rough arc through the air and struck his helmet with pinpoint accuracy. It was the same kind of defense ignoring true damage, and the guard didn't even let out a groan before collapsing stiffly to the ground like a felled log, his brains mingling with pixelated blocks in an utterly bizarre sight. I walked over, picked up the wooden pickaxe, and casually pulled a dirt block I had dug up by the roadside from my inventory before taking a couple of bites. The taste of dirt was nauseating, but as I ate, the heart-shaped health bar in the upper left corner began rapidly refilling. According to the system's rules, reaching full hunger automatically restored health. This was more effective than any medkit. Once I had fully recovered, I kicked open the factory's tottering iron door. The inside of the factory was spacious and dim, illuminated only by the pale light of a few emergency lamps. In an open area at the center, Harper was kneeling on the cold concrete floor with her hands bound behind her back. Her signature red hair was soaked by the rain and clung tightly to her pale cheeks. Her eyes were filled with despair and helplessness, yet she stubbornly refused to shed a single tear. Surrounding her stood 4 heavily armed killers. The one in charge was holding a Glock fitted with a silencer, its muzzle already pressed against the back of her head. It was this bastard. In my previous life, he was the one who pulled the trigger. Let her go. My voice was like a cold wind from hell, echoing through the empty factory. Everyone whipped around. When Harper saw me, the despair in her eyes instantly erupted into a glimmer of disbelief. Her cracked lips trembled slightly. Declan, what are you doing here? Run! It's a trap. Run! They're the ones who should be running tonight. I tightened my grip on the pickaxe and walked toward them step by step. The 4 killers froze for a moment before bursting into a cacophony of mocking laughter. Am I seeing things? What the hell is that kid holding? A children's toy? The lead killer pointed his gun at me derisively. Boss Julian said you were tough, but I guess the rain washed your brains out. Without a word, I suddenly pushed off with my feet and charged forward like a cannonball shot from a barrel. Take him out! A storm of bullets came at me again, but this time, I didn't take them head on. I quickly brought up the system control panel in my mind. Quick build. Material. Cobblestone. Bang, 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 under the killer's utterly horrified gazes. I sprinted forward while frantically conjuring one solid cobblestone wall after another in midair ahead of me. Bullets struck the cobblestone, sending sparks flying and stone fragments scattering everywhere. Yet they couldn't hinder me in the slightest. Like a bulldozer, I smashed straight through the last cobblestone wall and, surrounded by a storm of flying debris, reached them in an instant. Amid the hail of bullets, I grabbed Harper up from the ground and pinned her against an impregnable obsidian wall I had just conjured out of thin air, shielding her from the deadly stray bullets coming from all directions. Looking into her still panicked eyes, I lowered my head and kissed her trembling red lips hard, as though I meant to crush all the longing from 2 lifetimes into that single kiss. Then I turned around, my gaze instantly becoming as fierce as that of a savage wolf. I pulled out that battered wooden pickaxe and, without the slightest hesitation, brought it crashing down through the air at the multi-million-dollar Apache heavy attack helicopter outside the window, which was preparing to provide heavy fire support. Go to hell. Physics. Boom! A massive fireball erupted in the night sky, like a dazzling miniature sun rising. The Apache attack helicopter circling above the shipyard, loaded with Hellfire missiles and a 30mm cannon, did not explode when struck by the wooden pickaxe I threw. Instead, it was as if some higher dimensional force had forcibly erased its existence. The entire fuselage abruptly paused in midair. Then, in less than half a second, its heavy aviation armor, complex electronic components, and even the pilot inside all disintegrated into countless tiny, mosaic-covered pixel blocks. They rattled down into the cold Hudson River below without making even the slightest splash. Monster! He's a monster! Retreat! Quick! The few surviving killers completely broke down. A helicopter reduced to scraps in an instant by a wooden pickaxe? This was far beyond anything carbon-based life could comprehend. They dropped their guns and scrambled toward the outside of the factory. I couldn't be bothered to chase after those small fry. I bent down, picked up the remains of the wooden pickaxe, which had been reduced to nothing more than a stick after its durability ran out, tossed it into my inventory, and then yanked apart the nylon zip tie binding Harper's hands. Declan. Harper gasped for breath, her trembling hands clutching my jacket tightly. The way she looked at me was as if she were looking at an unfamiliar superhero, or a monster from outer space. How did you do that just now? That helicopter, and those stone walls that appeared out of nowhere. I gently stroked her wet red hair and held her tightly in my arms. Don't be afraid, Harper. I swear, I'll never let you get hurt again. I paused, sidestepping her question. It's not safe here. Julian will send more people soon. We have to leave immediately. I knew it would be difficult to explain, and according to the rules governing reincarnators, I couldn't tell her about the system or my past life, either, so let her think of it as some kind of supernatural power. This world was already insane to begin with. Braving the torrential rain, we climbed into the stolen Chevrolet Suburban. I wrenched the steering wheel, and the vehicle roared into the Brooklyn night. Where are we going? Harper asked, watching the nighttime scenery rush past outside the window. Still shaken. To the underground of New York. A cold glint flashed in my eyes. I'm going to build a fortress that even a nuclear bomb can't blast through. In my previous life, I was ultimately caught in the trap because my whereabouts were exposed and Julian's drones locked onto me. This time, I won't make the same mistake. The car stopped in front of the entrance to an abandoned subway construction tunnel in Lower Manhattan. Construction had been halted here for more than a decade due to funding issues, making it a perfect hiding place. I led Harper underground through the tunnel, which was filled with stagnant water and rats, following the faint beam of a flashlight until we reached a completely sealed rock face. There's nowhere else to go. Declan, this is a dead end. Harper warily surveyed their surroundings. To me, this world has no dead ends. I released Harper's hand and walked over to the solid granite wall. On the way here, I had already used the system to synthesize a brand new stone pickaxe. Although it lacked the wooden pickaxe's heaven-defying ignores defense attribute, its mining speed was much faster. System. Activate ultra-fast mining mode. I issued the command in my mind, then swung the stone pickaxe and hacked furiously at the granite wall like a tireless robot. Ding! 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 Under Harper's horrified gaze, the hard granite was smashed apart piece by piece as if it were tofu, turning into cubic stone blocks that then shot into my seemingly bottomless inventory. In less than 10 minutes, I had forcibly dug out a perfectly square passage 50 meters long, 3 meters wide, and 3 meters high in the bedrock deep beneath Manhattan. My God, just how much can that backpack of yours hold? Harper stared at me, eyes wide as bells, as I continuously stored tons of stone inside. I smiled faintly without explaining the system's infinite space. I led her to the end of the passage and began digging deeper underground. I was going to excavate a huge underground space to serve as our absolutely secure shelter. Half an hour later, I had cleared out a massive underground cavern 20 meters long, 20 meters wide, and 10 meters high. I had even unearthed several pieces of redstone ore glowing with a red light, along with some black coal blocks. Next, It's time to decorate. I opened my inventory and processed the hundreds of blocks of granite I had just mined into flat, smooth stone bricks at the crafting table. Then, like a mad master builder, I rapidly tapped my fingers through the air. Smack, smack, smack. Stone bricks appeared out of thin air, fitting seamlessly against the surrounding walls and ceiling of the cavern to form an indestructible blast-proof armor layer. To be extra safe, I even poured a layer of lava blocks into the space between the walls, the ultimate defense. Next, I crafted 2 comfortable beds from wooden planks and wool, several furnaces from stone, and several huge storage chests from wooden planks. I also crafted dozens of torches from coal and stuck them into the walls. The torches instantly lit up, giving off a warm, bright yellow glow that illuminated the cold, damp underground cavern as brightly as day. Welcome to our new home, Harper. I dusted off my hands and looked at the underground fortress before us, a place filled with pixelated style, yet incredibly cozy. Harper stood dazedly on the smooth stone brick floor, touched the torch on the wall that completely defied the laws of thermodynamics yet wouldn't set anything alight, and finally couldn't help bursting into laughter. What kind of monster are you, Declan? She asked with a laugh, tears welling in the corners of her eyes as she suddenly threw herself into my arms. But, as long as I have you, even if this were a pixelated mouse hole, I'd still feel that it was the safest place in the world. I held her tightly, and the worry that had been weighing on me finally lifted completely. The defenses are ready. Next, it's that old fox Julian's turn to spend a sleepless night. The underground fortress was warm as spring, while the torches on the walls crackled softly. Harper slept soundly on the soft woolen bed, the successive shocks and exhaustion having drained all her strength. I stood before the furnace, watching the burning coal inside smelt the rough iron ore into gleaming iron ingots. While Harper slept for those few hours, I used the system's built-in stepwise downward mining method to dig deep beneath New York to the deep slate layer at Y-50. Not only did I find iron, but with astonishing luck, I also hollowed out a massive gold vein. Suddenly, a muffled boom came from above, and even a few wisps of dust shook loose from the stone brick ceiling overhead. I furrowed my brow. That old fox Julian's instincts were even sharper than I had imagined. They must have tracked the Chevrolet Suburban's GPS signal, then used ground-penetrating radar to detect the tunnel I had dug. Declan? Harper was jolted awake by the vibration and sat up like a startled fawn. Sure, it's nothing. Go back to sleep. I walked over and soothingly ran my fingers through her hair. Just a few annoying basement rats. I'll go take care of them. I turned and walked out of the fortress. With a thought, I immediately sealed the entrance completely with several heavy blocks of obsidian. Since Julian had sent people here, I would give them a proper welcome in the tunnel. I walked outward through the pitch-black rocky passage, and soon the blinding beams of tactical flashlights appeared ahead. 10 mercenaries dressed in black urban camouflage, and wearing night vision goggles and skull masks were advancing toward me in a standard squad tactical formation. They were Julian's elite ghost squad, a group of cold-blooded executioners. Each man carried a modified P90 submachine gun, and their magazines were undoubtedly loaded with Teflon-coated armor-piercing rounds capable of punching through light armor. Target spotted. He's unarmed. No cover. Either. Open fire. Turn him into a sieve. The squad leader, Viper, snarled through his tactical headset. I neither dodged nor panicked. Instead, a cold sneer curled at the corners of my mouth. 1 second before they opened fire, I rapidly opened my inventory in my mind. 72 gold ingots instantly compressed into 8 gold blocks in the crafting table, and I placed in the center a red apple one had casually picked from the pine forest on the surface. Ding! Hidden recipe activated. Ultimate food successfully crafted. Enchanted golden apple. A heavy golden apple, radiating a dazzling purple magical aura, appeared out of thin air in the palm of my hand. In the game, players respectfully call this thing a notch apple, an invincible divine artifact capable of withstanding any damage in a desperate situation. What the hell is that? A glowing fruit? Open fire! Viper roared. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. 10 P90 submachine guns opened fire simultaneously in the narrow tunnel, their muzzle flashes illuminating the entire underground space. A dense barrage of armor-piercing rounds came whistling toward me like a deadly storm of steel. Without hesitation, I raised the enchanted golden apple and took a bite. Crunch! The crisp sound of chewing was extraordinarily eerie amid the hail of bullets. A sweet yet violent energy instantly exploded down my throat. Ding! Enchanted golden apple consumed. Powerful buffs acquired. Regeneration 4. Absorption 4. Resistance. Fire resistance. In an instant, 2 rows of additional heart-shaped health bars, flickering with dazzling golden light, suddenly appeared in the upper left corner of my vision. Golden protective energy, almost tangible, also erupted across the surface of my skin. Bang 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 bang. Hundreds, even thousands, of armor-piercing rounds capable of tearing an African elephant into shreds slammed into my chest, forehead, and limbs. But then, a scene that made my scalp tingle with terror unfolded. The instant those bullets touched my body, it was as though they had struck an invisible wall of vibranium. Their tips flattened and shattered on impact, then fell uselessly to the ground with a comical clink. The terrifying kinetic energy carried by the bullets was completely negated by that golden damage absorption shield. I didn't even take half a step back, not even the leather jacket was scratched. Impossible! What level of body armor is he wearing? Use a grenade launcher. Blast him to pieces. Viper's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets, and his voice was distorted by sheer terror. Boom! An underbarrel grenade exploded beneath my feet. The flames and shockwave engulfed my entire body. But with the combined effects of fire resistance and resistance boost, the astonishingly powerful explosion felt to me like a warm breeze blowing on a winter day. I slowly emerged from the black smoke completely unscathed, an iron sword forged from fresh iron ingots already in my hand, its blade gleaming with a cold light. Now it's my turn. I pushed off fiercely with my feet, and my entire body shot forward like a tyrannosaurus clad in golden armor, crossing more than a dozen meters in an instant and charging into the enemy formation. Monster! Die! Die! The mercenaries squeezed their triggers frantically, but could only watch helplessly as I raised my iron sword high. Whoosh! A plain horizontal slash with no unnecessary flourish. The two mercenaries at the front did not even have time to scream before their bodies disintegrated the instant the iron sword swept past them, bursting into a sky full of flying red mosaic blocks. Several glowing green experience orbs bounced out from where they had disappeared, wobbling as they merged into my body. The thrill of leveling up was simply more addictive than taking drugs. Go to hell! I laughed loudly as I launched into a one-sided slaughter among the mercenaries. Hack, slash, sweep, stab. There was no tactic to speak of, just pure stat overpowering. During the absolute invincibility period granted by the enchanted golden apple, I was like the Grim Reaper. Every swing of my sword claimed a life, leaving behind a field of pixel blocks and dropped items. In less than 30 seconds, the once arrogant ghost squad had been reduced to just one person. Its squad leader, Viper. He leaned against the cold rock wall, the submachine gun in his hands having long since run out of ammunition, producing only helpless click-click sounds. His legs gave way, and he dropped to his knees amid the scattered shell casings and pixel blocks, a reeking ammonia smell seeping from his crotch. I walked up to him, the golden aura of protective energy around me gradually fading. I patted his deathly pale cheek with the cold flat of my iron sword. Go crawl back to Silicon Valley. I looked down at him, my gaze as cold as a blade. Tell that old bastard Julian that his mercenaries and bullets are worth less than a fart to me. Keep your neck clean and wait. I'll be coming soon to smash that arrogant head of his. Oh, and remind him. I bent down slightly and whispered in his ear. Remember to prepare a slightly sturdier coffin for yourself, because wood is far too brittle in my presence. With that, I kicked him in the chest and watched as he fled toward the tunnel exit, scrambling away like a stray dog. When I returned to the underground fortress, Harper was holding a tactical terminal she had swiped from that unfortunate Ghost Squad member, her fingers flying across the screen. Declan, what did you just do? I heard something outside that sounded like World War III had broken out. She looked up at me. There was less fear in her eyes and a hint of excitement she could barely conceal. It seemed the girl's nerves were even tougher than I'd imagined. I just helped Julian clean out his trash employees. I walked over to the workbench in high spirits. What are you looking into? Julian's lifeline in New York. Harper turned the terminal screen toward me. When I was coordinating with them on the new energy project, I took precautions and implanted a tracking Trojan. I just found it. The underground level of a disguised meat processing plant in Queens is Julian's black vault. It doesn't just hold hundreds of millions in cash and gold that he uses for money laundering. It also contains his latest high-tech military prototypes. If we destroy it, Julian's financial lifeline and military trump card will be cut off instantly. Smart girl. I couldn't help leaning over and kissing her forehead. Since we were going on the offensive, it was time to change outfits. Enchanted golden apples might be invincible, but they were consumables. After all, it was time to unveil the true treasures I had unearthed deep beneath the ground. I summoned the crafting interface in my mind and withdrew 24 diamonds radiating an icy blue glow from my inventory. Diamonds I had mined at great risk to my life beside a lava lake deep underground. System. Craft a full set of diamond armor. Ding! Diamond helmet, diamond chestplate, diamond leggings, and diamond boots crafted. Current armor value. Full, accompanied by an intensely dazzling blue light. Those heavy diamonds instantly transformed into a set of deep blue heavy armor covered in barbs and streamlined pixel patterns, fitting snugly against my body. It looked as weighty as a medieval knight's armor, yet possessed a certain sci-fi quality that clearly did not belong to this world. Wow! Harper looked at me, her mouth parting slightly in surprise. You look like a superhero who's about to go slay a dragon. Pretty much. Tonight, I'm slaying a Silicon Valley vampire. I casually used the 3 remaining diamonds and 2 sticks to craft a diamond pickaxe, then carried it out of the fortress in my hand. Half an hour later, I swaggered up to the front entrance of that so-called meat processing plant, without bothering to disguise myself. I kicked open the heavy metal rolling door while wearing a full suit of glittering sapphire armor. Enemy attack! Open fire! Piercing alarms instantly rang out across the night sky, and dozens of fully armed security personnel poured in from all directions. Bullets of various calibers rained down on me like a torrential downpour, but this time, I couldn't even be bothered to dodge. The bullet struck my diamond breastplate, producing nothing but crisp clinks and not leaving so much as a scratch. Faced with such an overwhelming disparity in stats, these modern firearms were practically giving me a massage. Like a humanoid tyrannosaurus, I charged through the dense web of gunfire, swung my fist, and sent a guard rushing at me flying. Then I continued slaughtering my way through the passage toward the basement. At the end stood a bank-grade titanium alloy blast door weighing 50 tons and half a meter thick. Several guards watched from behind the barricades as I raised a blue-glowing pickaxe toward it, bursting into despairing laughter. That door can't even be blown open with C4. Has he lost his mind? I let out a cold laugh, tightened my grip on the diamond pickaxe, aimed it at the indestructible titanium alloy blast door, and brought it down with a vicious strike. System. Rapid destruction. Crash. Under everyone's horrified, ghost-seeing gaze, the half-meter-thick titanium alloy door, said to be capable of withstanding a small nuclear blast, let out a teeth-grating cracking sound the instant it came into contact with the diamond pickaxe. It then collapsed with a thunderous roar, transforming into a floor full of iron blocks. I stepped over the wreckage scattered across the floor and entered Julian's prized black vault. This place was practically a capitalist paradise. Piles of $100 bills, rows of gleaming gold bars, and a large number of exaggeratedly designed exoskeleton armor prototypes filled this space of several thousand square meters. System. Infinite inventory. Take everything. Wherever I passed, everything, from gold reserves worth tens of millions to military prototypes costing hundreds of millions, was disassembled by an irresistible force of rules and continuously sucked into my seemingly bottomless virtual inventory. In just 5 minutes, this underground vault, originally rich enough to rival a nation, had been completely emptied by me. Not even a single screw remained. To express my respect, I used a stinking block of dirt to create a giant middle finger sculpture in the very center of the now empty vault. Julian, the show is about to begin. The news that the Queen's black market had been completely dismantled would certainly make that hypocrite Julian so furious in his Silicon Valley mansion that he'd crush his expensive wine glass. But that wouldn't be enough. I wanted him to watch the empire he had built come crashing down overnight. Back at the underground fortress, I tossed the prototype exoskeleton wreckage I had scavenged from the black market into the smelter, watching it break down into refined iron ingots and some strange, faintly glowing crystals. Harper, do me a favor. I walked over to the workbench and pulled a large handful of dark red, fluorescent powder from my inventory. It was redstone dust I had dug out from deep underground. Harper immediately put down the tactical terminal in his hands and walked over. What do you need me to do, big hero? Help me locate the main power hub of Julian's Genesis building on Wall Street. As I spoke, I arranged redstone dust, sticks, and stone on the crafting grid. Ding! Redstone torch, redstone repeater, and redstone comparator crafting complete. Genesis Tower? Harper furrowed his brow. That's one of the most heavily defended commercial fortresses in the entire United States. The whole building is controlled by an artificial intelligence, and its internal defense systems are even more complex than those of the Pentagon. What are you planning to do? Storm it? Brute force is so boring. I let out a cold laugh. I'm going to use magic to defeat technology. A few minutes later, thanks to her genius hacking skills, Harper successfully infiltrated the blueprints of New York City's underground utility network. Found it. The Genesis Tower's main power hub isn't inside the building at all. It's in a concealed underground substation 3 blocks away. It's heavily guarded. Perfect. I changed into that flashy diamond armor and followed the tunnel we had dug earlier, activating rapid excavation mode underground and digging straight toward the substation. An hour later, I smashed through the wall and entered the substation's central control room. The guards didn't even have time to sound the alarm before a few heavy punches physically sent them to the afterlife. Looking at the enormous transformers and distribution panels before me, all intricately connected to the power grid of Lower Manhattan, I grinned. In the game, redstone technology is omnipotent. It can create the most complex automated machinery, and it can also unleash the purest destruction. I began laying redstone dust around the transformers. The dark red powder seemed almost alive as it automatically connected itself into glowing lines across the floor. I placed redstone torches at key nodes and used repeaters to extend the signal. Finally, I pulled out several perfectly square TNT blocks crafted from sand and gunpowder and placed them beneath the main distribution panel. This is a simple high-frequency redstone pulse circuit. The moment I pull the lever, it will instantly generate tens of thousands of electrical surges, enough to burn the entire substation's fuses to ash. Of course, with a little assistance from physics. I installed a wooden lever on the wall and took a deep breath. At this moment, there were still 2 hours until dawn. Wall Street remained brightly lit, while Julian's Genesis building stood proudly in the night like a colossal obelisk radiating a cold glow. I yanked the lever down. Click! The redstone circuit instantly burst into a dazzling red glow as high-frequency pulse currents surged wildly through the wiring and into the distribution panel. Almost at the same moment, the TNT block began emitting an extremely shrill hissing sound. Boom! A deep, thunderous explosion erupted underground, and the entire substation was instantly engulfed in flames. But protected by my diamond armor, I stood in the midst of the fire completely unharmed. The intense electrical surge and physical explosion instantly severed all main and backup power lines leading to the Genesis building. Above ground, an extraordinarily spectacular scene unfolded. The 90-story Genesis building, which had originally been as bright as daylight, seemed as though an invisible giant hand had clamped around its throat. Starting from the lowest floors, all the lights, neon signs, and security floodlights went out with a collective snap within a single second. The entire building instantly became a silent black tombstone. Artificial intelligence, cutting-edge defense systems, when faced with a physical power outage, they all became nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. I slowly made my way up from the underground ruins to the street. Wall Street in the distance had already descended into complete chaos. Sirens and cries of alarm rose and fell one after another. I rested the diamond pickaxe on my shoulder and looked up at the skyscraper devoured by darkness. Julian, I know you're in that luxurious office on the top floor right now. The bugle for the final assault has sounded. Get your neck ready, I'm coming. Inside the Genesis building, the darkness was as silent as a gigantic metal tomb. With the power out, all the high-tech security doors and access controls had become mere decorations. Wearing heavy diamond armor, I made my way unhindered to the elevator shaft on the building's first floor. 90 floors might be enough to exhaust an ordinary person to death, but for a player with a sandbox system, it's merely a simple geometry problem. I pried open the elevator doors and stood at the bottom of the vast, pitch-black shaft. Looking up, I could see no end. From my inventory, I summoned hundreds upon hundreds of cheap dirt and cobblestone blocks. Place a block, jump, place. Thump, thump, thump. I began jumping straight up in the elevator shaft with extreme, unhinged absurdity. Each time I jumped, a block would somehow materialize beneath my feet. It was as if I were climbing an invisible escalator, rising in a ridiculous posture that completely disregarded Newton's law of universal gravitation. Until I had literally padded my way to the building's top floor, the 90th, in under a minute. With one kick, I sent the heavy oak double doors of the president's top-floor office flying open, and a howling wind mixed with icy rain instantly rushed inside. Out on the helipad stood a steel holographic monster nearly 3 meters tall. This was Julian's final trump card, an Omega-class military exoskeleton mech powered by an independent miniature nuclear fusion reactor. Its shoulders were fitted with miniature missile launchers, its right arm wielded a high-frequency particle vibration blade, and its left arm mounted a 6-barrel Gatling cannon. Inside the cockpit of this steel behemoth, whose construction cost exceeded $1 billion, Julian Thorne was glaring at me through the bulletproof glass. His face, usually one he prided on being elegant, was now twisted into that of a madman. Declan Hayes, you're still alive. Julian's voice blared through the mech's external speakers, deafeningly loud. You destroyed my empire, ruined everything I built. You think putting on this glowing piece of cosplay junk will let you defeat the pinnacle of technology? I didn't answer. I simply stared at him coldly. Go to hell, you maggot who clawed your way up from the bottom. Julian had completely lost his mind. The Gatling cannon mounted on his left arm erupted with a deafening roar. 6,000 depleted uranium armor-piercing rounds per minute lashed against my body like fiery whips, sending sparks flying and shredding the luxurious furnishings around us. However, the bullets striking my diamond armor could still only produce that despair-inducing clang. Under the absolute defense of my system's full-strength armor, this killing machine representing the pinnacle of human technology couldn't even remove half a heart from my health bar. This is impossible. This doesn't conform to the laws of physics. Julian stared at me, completely unscathed, and nearly suffered a mental breakdown. He abruptly activated his thrusters, wielded a particle vibration blade capable of slicing through a main battle tank, and charged at me like a ferocious beast. I sighed and put the diamond sword in my hand, which could cut through iron as easily as mud, back into my inventory. Since you love talking about physics so much, I'll give you a lesson in ultimate physics. In the pouring rain, right in front of him, I pulled that square workbench out of thin air. Clatter! The workbench hit the ground. I took out 3 oak planks and 2 sticks. Under Julian's astonished, bewildered gaze, as if he even thought I had gone mad, I leisurely tapped away at the workbench a few times. Ding! A crude wooden pickaxe, so roughly made that its splinters hadn't even been smoothed down, appeared in my hand. You intend to fight my Omega mecha with a lousy piece of wood? Julian laughed furiously. The mecha's thrusters roared under the strain, and the particle blade came crashing down toward my head, wreathed in blue arcs of electricity. I raised my head, not a trace of pity in my eyes. System. Conceal passive abilities. True damage and absolute destruction. Activate. I suddenly drove off with both legs, and, empowered by the diamond boots, soared high into the air, according to the rules of the sandbox game. An attack made while jumping and descending was guaranteed to trigger a critical hit. I gripped the cheap wooden pickaxe with both hands, faced the billion-dollar steel behemoth, took aim at its seemingly indestructible titanium alloy cockpit, and brought the pickaxe down with all my might. Wooden pickaxe headshot, physical exorcism. Crash. The instant the wooden pickaxe struck the mech's bulletproof glass, time seemed to stand still. There was no earth-shattering explosion, nor the deafening roar of twisting metal. The Omega mech, which embodied the pinnacle of all human technology, was reduced by the wooden pickaxe's utterly unreasonable rule-based judgment to something like a shoddy toy made of building blocks. The enormous steel body disintegrated in an instant, transforming into iron ingots, redstone dust, and glass blocks that filled the air before clattering to the ground like pixelated rain. Deprived of the mech's support, Julian slammed into the cold standing water like a discarded rag doll. His expensive custom suit was caked in muddy water. The eyes that had once held such arrogance now contained nothing but pure fear and despair. He trembled as he backed away, staring at the wooden pickaxe in my hand, not even a single crack marring it, as though he were looking at an indescribable god of death. "You, what are you? Exactly, God?" he asked, trembling, his voice hoarse. "I'm not God." I walked up to him and looked down at him condescendingly. "I'm just a player with cheats enabled." I raised my wooden pickaxe and lightly tapped it against the center of his brow. Thud. Julian's body suddenly went rigid. Then, amid a strange glow, his entire form transformed into a mass of red pixel blocks and scattered away on the wind. All that remained was a pile of experience orbs, along with a solitary black nether star symbolizing his wicked soul. I bent down, picked up the nether star, and let out a long breath of stale air. The eastern sky began to brighten. The first rays of dawn pierced New York's heavy clouds, spilling across this battered rooftop and glinting off my deep blue diamond armor. I walked to the edge of the building and looked down over the awakening steel jungle. All the hatred had been settled, and Harper's and my new world was only just beginning. In this world, I was the only law. The end.